Hello and welcome to Timeless with Julie Hartman Live. It is Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. I'm Julie Hartman, and it is great, as always, to be with you. Now, those of you who listen to Timeless know that usually we do not do Timeless on a Thursday. Those of you who are new to Timeless, welcome. This is a show that is live Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. By the way, I also have a show on this channel with Dennis Prager, which is aptly named Dennis and Julie, and that's every Sunday at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. But usually we don't do Timeless, as I said, on Thursdays. So why am I doing this episode today? By the way, hello to Sean McConnell in the producer's dungeon.
Do I get overtime for this?
Take that up with other people. I'm deferring to them on that subject. We usually don't do the show today, but. I'm seeing someone's writing Thursday party. That's right, Tessa, Thursday party. Well, it's not so much of a party as it is looking at the wokeism that permeated one party today. Today was Harvard's graduation ceremony. I woke up this morning quite early to watch the live stream of this graduation ceremony because I suspected that, like some other graduation ceremonies, there might be some protests, there might be some wokeism popping up here and there throughout the commencement. And as I was watching some of the student speeches, to be really frank, I was just floored by many of the things that they said, not just about Gaza, but about the United States of America. And instead of analyzing it next week and waiting a few days, I thought I'd just bring it to you today in real time. Because again, I woke up anyway, watched it this morning, and I want you to see this. Because Harvard, obviously, is known not just in the United States, but globally as the epitome of an American university. And so we really got to pay attention to what the world considers to be the epitome of the American university is saying about the United States of America. And I also, just before we dive in, I want to acknowledge something that is, I think, relevant to this discussion, which is that I graduated from Harvard 2 years ago in 2022. Oh, yes, thanks for throwing up the call-in number. I forgot to do that. 844-861-5537 is the call-in number, 844-861-5537. I have a direct line here to the chat, which of course I'll be monitoring and reading aloud, but I don't know if we'll have call-ins, time that is for call-ins today. But as I said, it is important to acknowledge that I graduated from Harvard fairly recently. It was not long ago. It was just 2 short years ago when I was sitting there for my graduation. And during this show, I am going to be a bit critical of Harvard and a bit critical of these student speakers who I'm going to be profiling. But I just want to say that I loved Harvard in many ways. I lost an entire year of my experience there. My whole junior year was online because of the COVID lockdowns, and part of my sophomore year, that was during 2020. Of course, there are parts of the experience such as that I think were ridiculous and not warranted, and I've been very open about some of those criticisms. But I just want to tell you that I am coming from a place of loving this university and all of the good that it gave me. I have so many friends from Harvard who will be my friends for life. They will be the bridesmaids at my wedding. They will be the godparents to my kids. I will always be so grateful to that school for giving me these treasures of friends in my life. Also, ironically, Harvard, when I was at Harvard, I went on this fantastic trip to Israel, of all places. 100 undergraduates got to go on a basically all expenses paid for trip to Israel by Harvard. That was one of the most formative experiences of my entire life. I lived in a gorgeous dorm. I had great faculty mentors. I am not one of these people that's going to come up here and totally slimeball the institution that gave me so much. I am coming from a place of wanting what is best for this school. and believing in the potential of this school and so many other universities, which have so many resources, so much potential, and yes, even despite the nutbags and the crazies, do have good people. So I am talking to you as a Harvard graduate, a person who loves the school, who wants the best for the school, but also equally and more importantly, as an American. And I love my country. And I am disgusted by the anti-Americanism that has permeated these universities. And as much as I will praise Harvard for what it has given me, I will also be relentless in holding it to account for allowing and perpetuating the kind of entitlement and extremism that we're about to see. Sean, I see you're about to cut in. Yes.
No, I just think it's very important that you just did what you just did, to make that distinction that you're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Of course not.
Because that's what we see from the left so often.
Yes.
One bad thing, throw out the whole box. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad you did that, and I wanted to point that out so that people realize you're different.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I always, when I was there were so many people who would criticize Harvard. Harvard is to divest from fossil fuels. Harvard is to divest from, Israel. Like, people were so relentless when I was there about their criticisms of Harvard. And sometimes I'd look at them and I'd be like, this institution has given you so much. Don't just totally slimeball it. So you get the point, but I really do want to say how grateful I am for what that school gave me. But nevertheless, I also want to acknowledge that it is in a bad place, because what we're about to see, I'm going to profile 2 student speeches this morning, not the whole things, don't worry, because that would be quite long. I've picked the highlights. At graduation, they pick a few student speakers, one from the undergraduate class and then one from a graduate school class. Today's speaker was from the law school, and they allow them to give speeches for 5 to 6 minutes. And what these individuals said about the United States, and separately about Gaza, which we'll talk about a little bit, but really about the United States, it's so concerning. And it shows you what these universities have taught, what these universities have allowed. And as these speakers acknowledge, they are the future leaders of America. They are the future lawyers. They are the future politicians. They are the future leaders in almost every category. And so if this is what they believe about America and are so proudly saying at graduation, we ought to really be concerned. So let's roll it. This first part of the speech is from, again, this was literally this morning. This was just a few hours ago, by Robert L. Clinton IV. He is now, I guess, a graduate of Harvard Law School. And let's just play this one clip.
We will be decision makers, and we will have discretion. Over and over, we will bear responsibility for making decisions that will change other people's lives.
He's right.
Think about just some of the people whose lives we may help shape. Women dealing with the fallout of having their reproductive rights stripped.
Here we go.
Immigrants fleeing places where there are no universities left from which to graduate. Trans and queer people forced to hide who they are. Climate refugees escaping homes that have become uninhabitable. One of the 1 in 3 black boys who can expect to go to jail in his lifetime. And citizens whose only mistake was being born poor in a country like America that criminalizes poverty.
All right, let's pause for a moment. I saw Sean's face. You guys have to understand, I was watching this morning, and it was like one after the other. I didn't think it could get worse. You know, he's doing the reproductive rights thing. I'm like, okay, of course that's going to happen. And then the trans and queer thing. and then the climate change thing, and then the like whammy to end all whammies was at the end with America criminalizing poverty. Are you bleeping kidding me? It is so gross. It is just so gross. And so he's saying all of these lies about America, and they are lies. Lies. And even more concerning than that was the roaring applause of the students. And you'll see in subsequent clips that when sentences like the ones you heard are spoken, there's just thunderous, emphatic support from many of the people in the audience. And then the camera pans to the student body and people are standing up and clapping. So again, this is something that we all ought to pay attention to, because people could go, oh yeah, that's just one student. That's one super woke student who made a super woke claim. Yeah, it's par for the course right now in American universities, but that's just, one person. No. Look at the entire audience. That doesn't mean that every single person in the audience agreed. I was texting with some people who I know, my friends who are still there, who are writing to me like, oh my God. But it is worthy of notice that a lot of them did agree. So I want to go through, and I won't spend too much time on it. We could literally spend like 8 episodes, one for each lie that was just spoken there. But I just want to go through and sort of debunk, because one of the problems in this country is that when we hear something like this repeated enough, it just kind of becomes accepted. That's the very mainstream saying. If you repeat a lie enough, then it becomes a truth, or at least believed to be a truth. So let's go through here, okay? So this law school student said, quote, women dealing with the fallout of having their reproductive rights stripped. And to back up, as we just heard, he was saying these are, we're the leaders, and these are the people who we're going to be fighting for and representing. Women dealing with the fallout of having their reproductive rights stripped. Okay, let me just pause for a moment. I am a woman, and I am someone who is very, very conflicted morally and legally on the subject of abortion. I have said this so many times on this show when I'm guest hosting for Dennis. I'm very conflicted about it. I would not call myself a pro-life absolutist nor a pro-choice absolutist. I frankly don't really quite know where I stand. But there is this myth in this country right now that women writ large are having their reproductive rights stripped. Look at that gratuitous statement. That is not true. First of all, in approximately half of U.S. states, blue states, full abortion, or I shouldn't say full, abortion, very robust abortion rights are permitted. And by the way, even in many red states, abortion is permitted. I'll give you an example. What do people consider to be the most, conservative, Handmaid's Tale-esque, women-hating, abortion-denying state in the union? People would think of Florida. Big, bad Governor Ron DeSantis, who, by the way, I love. Just for the record, I love Ron DeSantis. But you know my point. People are going, oh my gosh, Florida is this horrible place. Let me tell you right now what Florida has on the books with regard to abortion. Abortion is permitted up until 6 weeks. And then there is a subsequent law that is coming into effect that actually has extended that to 15 weeks. Now, you can agree or disagree with that. You can think 6 weeks is too stringent. You can think 6 weeks is too much. Putting your personal opinion about that aside, it is not true that women are being stripped of their reproductive rights if they are allowed to have an abortion up until 6 weeks. And by the way, that statute allows exceptions, and I'm reading directly here from the statute, or that's not, sorry, I want to be very precise. I'm reading here from the Daily Wire's summary of the statute. That 6 weeks statute allows exceptions for, quote, the life of the mother, rape, incest, and rare fatal fetal abnormalities. Okay? again, we have to set the record straight here. This is why I'm taking the time to tell you these facts, because these myths just get spread that people, women in general are writ large being stripped of their freedoms. Kamala Harris, our vice president, said the other day that we're going back to the time, of our mothers and grandmothers before women could vote. And there's this effort to repeal the rights of women. It's so dishonest. And this is coming from someone who wouldn't fully consider myself to be 100% pro-life. I am an objective person who is looking at this objectively. And by the way, to speak more about Florida has a ballot initiative this November, which will allow Floridians to vote on this matter of abortion. And if they vote to pass the measure, it would guarantee a woman's right to an abortion up until 6 months of pregnancy. That's what's going on in, Handmaid's Tale-esque Florida. It's so dishonest. And then we have the leaders of the future leaders of the United States and perhaps the future leaders of the world throwing out these assertions like that. So that was number one, women dealing with the fallout of having their reproductive rights stripped. The second one, immigrants fleeing places where there are no universities left from which to graduate. Do you understand? I'm not even trying to be facetious right now. Do you understand what he's saying? What is he saying? Like they can't go to university?
I think he's alluding to the fact that there may be countries where there aren't universities to graduate from.
Oh, I see.
I'm ignorant to that. I don't know if that's true.
I see.
Have universities been shut down in other countries? I don't know.
So he's saying we're representing immigrants fleeing places. Okay, all right. Well, that's a good clarification. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that statement. He's saying we will possibly be representing immigrants. Okay, fine. He goes on to saying we'll be representing, quote, trans and queer people forced to hide who they are.
Yeah, I gave that same face. I'm trying to figure out where they're hiding.
Yeah, I know. With respect, I don't think hide is not a word that I would use. With respect. I mean, come on. Again, the reason I'm highlighting this is it shows such a stark disconnect with what is really going on in America. You know where trans and queer people have to hide who they are? In places like half of Africa's 54 countries which criminalize homosexuality, including, in some cases, the death penalty, like in Uganda. You know where trans and queer people have to hide who they are? In a place like communist China or in Putin's Russia, where none of that is allowed. That is where trans, why am I saying twans? I'm getting trans and queer, the two words jumbled together. That is where trans and queer people have to hide who they are. It is such a lie about America. And by the way, it is such a lie about conservatives, that conservatives are these trans and queer and LGBTQ hating people. Let me tell you, I am conservative. I have been steeped in the conservative media world for 4 years. I have a talk show with Dennis Prager. I interviewed Larry Elder recently. I have met, and I'm not saying this as a brag, I'm saying this as I know a lot of the most prominent conservatives in America. I have never met a single conservative who hates trans people or hates queer people. The conservative position on this matter is very simple. And again, of course, there are some crazies who may hate trans people. Of course, there are always exceptions. But the conservative position on this matter is, don't trans the kids. That's really it. If you want to be trans when you are of the right age to make a decision of informed consent about your body, you have a right to do that. It's a free country. If you'd like to change your name, if you'd like to change your pronouns, you have a right to do that. It's a free country. What conservatives are opposing is not transing the kids in schools. Not having, as I reported yesterday, the Seattle Public School District have a healthcare organization, this is a Daily Wire reporting, that touts that they give hormone therapy as part of gender affirming care to elementary and middle school students in Seattle public schools. That is what conservatives are opposing. Conservatives are opposing all of these school districts, and I have profiled so many of them on this show, who are teaching people as young as kindergarten about non-binaryism, that they may not be their gender. Look up Illinois school district number 65. They have this on the internet. You can go to PowerPoint slides and see what they are teaching preschoolers, kindergartners about these matters. Come on, it's ridiculous. He's saying trans and queer people are forced to hide who they are. No, that's not what's going on. By the way, look at what our Department of Justice is doing. The Department of Justice right now is suing the state of Tennessee because Tennessee passed a law which bans puberty blockers and gender-altering surgeries for minors. And our country's Department of Justice is suing that state and saying that that statute in Tennessee is discrimination. That shows you, and I think that's despicable, but that shows you just how much trans and queer people by our government are, in their view, they're being protected. In my view, I think it's a despicable thing to give hormone blockers to children. But you understand my point. He is talking about this reality which does not writ large exist. The opposite exists, that a lot of this has been made very mainstream and indeed been proselytized to children. But nevertheless, a Harvard Law School student is getting up and saying that in general in America, trans and queer people have to hide who they are. Let's go on to more. Climate refugees escaping homes that have become uninhabitable. What? Okay, I'm just gonna keep going. 1 in 3 black boys who is expected to go to jail in his lifetime. I mean, we know all of the left talking points on this. I mean, there is not overwhelming evidence that the United States of America is throwing black people in prison because they are black. That's just the truth. There is not overwhelming evidence of that occurring. In fact, there have been, look at what Heather McDonald just reported in the Wall Street Journal and in the City Journal. There's something called the California Racial Justice Act that was passed in 2020, which allows people who are in prison to challenge their conviction based, and they can argue that their conviction was handed down in systemic bias. Now, again, there is not overwhelming evidence that there is right now in America systemic bias against black people in the prison system or in the policing system. But we also know that there have been so many measures that have been taken, including this one, to possibly provide some recourse if that is the case. And by the way, Heather McDonald outlined how very irrational this law is, and kind of the loopholes and provisions which are not going to amount to anything good. I'll let you read that Wall Street Journal article for yourself to get some more of those points. But it's just the constant peddling of America is a, minority hating, oppressive, terrible place for people. And we Harvard graduates have to represent all of these people in this against this horrible entity that is America. And again, it is just so gross. And that doesn't mean, of course, I feel it's so hard because you always have to provide these caveats. Of course, there are some trans people and queer people and black people who are discriminated against in this country. Of course. Just when people talk about police brutality, of course there are instances of police brutality. But again, this person is talking about this like this is the widespread, fundamental reality in America, and that is just not true. And then the culminating, as I said, the whammy to end all whammies, citizens whose only mistake was being born poor in a country like America, which criminalizes poverty. Sean's going like that. I mean, do you know how lucky we are to live in a place like America, which has a great welfare state? I don't necessarily mean great in terms of a moral judgment, but great in terms of its size. I mean, look at what happened during COVID with all of the stimulus that was provided to citizens, to businesses. We're so lucky to live in a country which tries to help people who are in poverty. Now, I actually think America could do a much better job, a more effective job at helping people who are in poverty. But to say that America as a country criminalizes poverty with all that we try to do to help people, not just in our own country, but people who are not in our own country. As we know, millions of illegal immigrants have flocked to our southern border over the past 3 years, and they are fleeing war-torn, poverty-stricken countries to come get a better life in America. In places like New York, there's a program of $53 million in prepaid debit cards to give those individuals food and shelter. But America criminalizes poverty. Absurd. Absolutely absurd.
I don't even know what that means. America who? America what?
I know.
Are you talking about our politicians that line their pockets and create a larger gap
Mic
between
drop.
the rich and the poor, crushing the middle class? Who is America? Who are you mad at?
Mic drop.
Big business? Mm-hmm. I honestly, it seems like they reward poverty. They're paying off your student loans.
Good point.
Come on now.
Absolutely. Come on
This
now.
always makes me, and you said this guy is lying, and it is a lie. I just wonder, as Dennis Prager often wonders, is he lying on purpose? Is he genuine, or is he just repeating, and this is the narrative, and this is what people clap for? You know what I mean? Because he seems like a
Excellent
smart
point.
dude.
Excellent point. I'm really glad you said that, Sean, because thank you. Because here's the thing. Yes, these individual statements are lies about America. It is quite literally a lie that America criminalizes poverty. I would really appreciate if this individual would point me to a statute in the United States of America which criminalizes poverty. And so he's using that term loosely, but he as a law student should be more precise, because there's absolutely no statute in America which throws you in jail for the simple reality of your being poor. So that is quite literally a lie. But as Sean is cutting in here and saying, and again, thank you for it, is that it's hard because truthfully, I'm very conflicted on this, because half of me really wants to hold these individuals to account for squandering their American privilege by perpetuating these lies about America. And honestly, at this point, I'm sorry, they should wake up to it. They should know the truth. Part of it, I think, is they're blindfolding themselves to the truth because they see personal and professional advantage in being a social justice warrior and getting up and lying about America. But on the other hand, I do take your point, Sean. I know a lot of people, and it's a complicated thing, from these universities who are truly brainwashed. Like they're not they exist in their TikTok sphere where they're getting their very, careful algorithm of news about how America is a systemically racist police state. And I acknowledge that the brainwash is real. But again, at this point, I think there has been enough evidence and enough counterpoints that have been exposed of the truth for people, especially someone in that person's position, to realize that America does not criminalize you for being born poor. I want to be harsh on him. I'm sorry.
If America
So
criminalizes
absurd.
poverty, why is our border overrun with people trying to get in here?
That's what I just said. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, did you just say that? Did I miss that?
No,
I'm
I was
sorry.
saying,
Yeah.
we, America, this place that criminalizes poverty, which have taken millions and millions of illegal immigrants fleeing poverty, and in places like New York, having a $53 million program in prepaid debit cards. By the way, as I reported recently, according to our Department of Housing and Urban Development, from 2002 to 2023, veteran homelessness increased 7.2%. And general homelessness increased 12% in that year. We now have over 650,000 Americans who are homeless. So if we're going to go down this path of America, again, of course, America doesn't criminalize poverty, but you take the general point of America not helping the poor. Why are we giving $53 million in prepaid debit cards to people who are not citizens of this country, who, by the way, we may have a profound amount of sympathy for, as I do, but then meanwhile, we have ever increasing veteran and general homelessness, and we're not allocating those funds to help those individuals. It's funny because sometimes the things that this person is saying, I sort of weirdly agree with it, but in the opposite way that this person means, you know? But come on, America criminalizing poverty, it's so gross. This is who Harvard is putting up there as a speaker, saying this about his country that has given him and all of us so much. Come on, ridiculous. Let's roll another clip from this is Robert L. Clinton IV's speech.
Graduates, you know what we must do. The degrees we're receiving call us to action, standing up to dictators, being mentors, using your Harvard connections to help people who didn't go here, voting, not being silent or neutral or apathetic in the face of injustice. And to that end, speaking out against the fact that America has 5% of the world's population, but incarcerates 20% of the world's prisoners. And demanding a ceasefire in Gaza.
Okay, here's what's fascinating to me about this clip. Putting his political statements aside, or I mean sort of like the substance of the political statements aside, whether you agree or disagree with, for instance, whether there should be a ceasefire in Gaza. This is a graduation ceremony. Like, we've so lost the plot here, people. Graduation, when you're graduating from law school or you're graduating from college, this should not be the time to make political statements, I don't think. Like, enjoy the fact that you have worked so hard, that you are getting a degree. Enjoy the day, you know? And I remember when I was sitting there and there were these who was my commencement speaker? I'm forgetting her name. Jacinda Ardern. She was the prime minister. I love how I looked to Sean. Sean, remind me who my commencement speaker was. And the whole speech was about what she has done in New Zealand. She was talking about the gun buyback program in New Zealand. She was talking about decriminalizing abortion, and, you know, people were cheering in the audience. And I just remember sitting there and thinking, I'm graduating from college today. This is like the one day of my life that I really don't want to hear about guns and abortion. You know what I want to hear about? I want to hear about life. I want to hear about life advice, career advice, dating and marriage advice. What do you know that I don't know? Not about guns, not about abortion, not about running a country. About this great journey of life that I'm about to embark on that I really don't know very much about. And we have just, again, so lost it here. We look at each of these speeches, and you can totally agree with this guy that there should be a ceasefire in Gaza, or you can totally disagree with this guy. But I hope you take my point, and I'd be very interested to see what you're saying. I'm reading the chat here, which I appreciate your comments. Yeah, people are agreeing it's a little kooky. But whether you agree with the ceasefire or disagree with the ceasefire, or agree that America is a police and carceral state or disagree, is this the moment? These universities have made us into these political creatures. Now, someone may look at me and go, well, wait a minute, Julie, you know, you're political, you're talking about things. You're absolutely right, I am. But I wouldn't get up and give a speech at the graduation ceremony calling for a, you know, something like a policy about a foreign country and what they should do. Not the moment. Not the moment. What do you think, Sean?
I think this guy's number one point of outrage should be the cost to him to have that degree from Harvard that he's going to be trying to pay off for the next 30 years, the fact that he won't be able to buy a home, that he is now launched into a world of debt where the dollar is not worth what it used to be, and he should be upset at America for that.
I know. But it's just like, enjoy the day. Just don't get up there and call for a seat. Like, come on. Let everybody have a moment of no politics. No politics. All right. Let's look at another speaker. This was an undergraduate speaker. Okay. Her name is Sruthi Kumar. I actually liked some of the points that she made in the speech. Again, as I said at the beginning of this episode, I'm not 100% anti-Harvard or 100% anti, some of these speakers. She actually started the speech by talking about how little we know and how we have to be humble in the face of not knowing things. And I'm like, I agree with that. There's a lot that we don't know. But then, of course, it predictably got very, very political. So let's just listen to a little part of her address.
In our first year, during COVID, we didn't have Annenberg to meet 100 people in an hour and walk out remembering 5 names. What did we do? Hefes became the new Annenberg, and we learned to connect differently.
Okay, pause.
Building quality.
So she's talking about, she was going through the different years of Harvard and the different political things that have happened. I should have said that before the speech. So she just talked about how her freshman year, they were locked down due to COVID and she couldn't go to Annenberg, which is the main dining hall, and instead they found friendships differently. Here's what I think when I see something like that. And again, very curious to hear what you think, and I'm glad the chat is robust. Okay, yes, it's great for her to acknowledge the way that they handled the difficulty of the COVID year. But it sort of makes me sad because I just want to say to her, you should be criticizing Harvard for doing that. You should be criticizing the irrational bureaucratic COVID restrictions that ruined your freshman year. It's just, again, I don't think you should be getting up and saying things that are political at this graduation ceremony. But it seems that she's not sort of upset at Harvard for that. And then you'll see the later things she criticizes Harvard for. And in my view, it's kind of warped. If you should be criticizing Harvard for something, I think it should be that you were an 18-year-old who was not at risk of dying from COVID and nevertheless had to wear masks and social distance from people and not go to your freshman dining hall because of the extreme precautions that they took. Just wanted to say that. But let's listen to what she continues with. And again, just notice how political it is. My gosh.
Over quantity in our friendships. In our sophomore year, Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Like, come on.
And there was, and still is, in many parts of the country, an omnipresent uncertainty in accessing reproductive health care.
Okay, pause. Again, as we just talked about, there is not writ large in this country an omnipresent uncertainty about reproductive health care. In some cases, there are. But as we have seen in a lot of states, there are abortion rights. There's just this myth that is just constantly peddled about this, and it's not fair. But even putting that aside, it just makes me sad for her and for my generation. Again, how political everything is. Like when she's reflecting on her sophomore year, and I say this with total respect for her, like you should be talking about the great class you took sophomore year, or the great party you went to, or like, you go, our sophomore year, Roe v. Wade was overturned. That's what you remember about your sophomore year? Right? We've lost the plot, people. We've become these insane, like, political creatures. There's so much more to life than that. Let's keep going.
In our junior year, Harvard faced the Supreme Court and the decision to reverse affirmative action.
Oh my gosh.
Whether we realize it or not, we've been swimming in uncharted waters.
Here comes Gaza.
Which brings me to our senior year. A year on campus marked by enormous uncertainty. In the fall, my name and identity, alongside other Black and brown students at Harvard, was publicly targeted. For many
Okay, pause.
of us,
I'm so sorry. Pause. Of course, I can't speak generally to the groups which publicize these student names. I can't. But a lot of these students' names were publicized, not because they were Black and brown, but because the students signed the petition after October 7th, which, quote, held the Israeli regime entirely responsible for the violence of October 7th. It's just, again, and again, I can't speak for every single organization or entity which tried to publicize the names of these students. But she's saying, you know, she's essentially implying it's because we were Black and brown that we were targeted. And the evidence does not match up to that. The names were exposed because they signed the petition. Let's continue.
Doxing left our jobs uncertain, our safety uncertain. This semester, our freedom of speech and our expressions of solidarity became punishable.
Okay, pause. Again, there were a lot of different incidences of what she's referring to. But when Harvard took action against many of the students in the encampments, which I believe is what she's referring to, it's because they were camping out on student property, refusing the provisions of the university that you can't do that. They were ignoring the university's rules to clear out. In one case, they took down the American flag in Harvard Yard and put up a Palestinian flag. You can't do that. That's somebody else's property. Another student harassed a Jewish student on the way to class. I mean, this is like, there were reasons for why the university took action. Keep rolling it.
Leaving our graduations uncertain. As I stand before you today, I must take a moment to recognize my peers. The 13 undergraduates.
Look at that emphatic applause. It's very revelatory.
The 13 undergraduates in the class of 2024 who will not graduate today. I am deeply disappointed by the intolerance for freedom of speech and the right to civil disobedience on campus. Over 1,500 students had petitioned. Nearly 500 staff and faculty had spoken up, all overwhelmingly against the unprecedented sanctions. As an American and as a Harvard graduate, for me, what is happening on campus is about liberty. This is about civil rights and upholding democratic principles. The students had spoken. The faculty had spoken.
This is really important.
you hear us? Harvard, do you hear us?
Look at them smiling in the back. These are the leaders of the university. They're smirking. All right. But you hear the emphatic applause. Okay, that clip was worth everything because it shows what I have been saying on this show for so long. What I wish I could counsel Harvard to do is to say to students, we're the ones in charge, okay? Look at what she just said. She goes, the students have spoken. Harvard, do you hear us? Harvard, do you hear us? Like, Harvard, you have to capitulate to exactly what we want because we, the students, have spoken, and you, Harvard, have to follow us and march in lockstep with us. You know what Harvard should do as a university? And to some extent, they've been doing this even by not allowing the 13 students to graduate. So to an extent, they've been doing it. They've also been negotiating with the people in the encampments and capitulating to them. But if I were in charge of a university, you know what I would say? I would say, you applied here. You knew what you were getting. You knew what we invested in. You knew what our, the way we do business. You know what our rules are on property and encampments and et cetera. Or if you didn't know, you should have looked it up before you applied here. We are the ones in charge, and you're coming to us, paying tuition to us for us to educate you, but also this is our campus and this is our university and these are our rules. We do not have to capitulate to you. If you do not like it, you are more than welcome to withdraw from the school and go to any other school of your choice where you like the rules there. These universities for so long, every time students have issued a complaint or they've whined, the university's been like, oh my gosh, I have to cower. I have to, give them exactly what they want. They've totally lost the whole sense of authority. Now, by the way, if there's something genuinely that a university needs to fix, of course students should, say what it is that they think the university should fix. I am a pro-free speech absolutist. I think students should have a right to criticize the administration and say what they would want to have changed. But that doesn't mean the administration has to capitulate. And just in that speech, to me, again, and I say this with respect, it just reeks of entitlement. It's like, we have all spoken, and you, Harvard, do you hear us? We want you to do what we want. Harvard doesn't have to do what you want. Harvard's in charge. What do you think, Sean? He's cutting him like, I don't want to touch this. As I've said before, it's like politics at a Thanksgiving dinner with your extended family. It's like, oh, pass the turkey. I don't know if I want to make a comment.
I don't know when things turned in this country that it became so important to listen to kids.
Yes.
That will be the downfall of Western civilization. It makes me want to raise the voting age when I hear this stuff.
Like, what do you know about what's going on in Gaza? I mean, again, this girl's speech, the first part of it, she was talking about exercising humility in what we don't know. I'm like, okay, I'm with you. But then, as we're going to see in just the final clip, she's talking about Gaza, and it's just like, just generally these students, it's like, it takes amazing pomposity to like call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Do you know military strategy? You're 22 years old,
The outrage is so selective. There's no outrage for the Christians being murdered in Nigeria.
Exactly.
Where is that outrage?
Yes.
It's hard to sit here and watch this. I feel like you should have to pay taxes for 10 years before you're allowed to vote.
No, absolutely.
I really do. And I know that sounds weird because I was young too once, but I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was voting for. And you can get outraged. You have the right to protest. You do.
Of course.
But you don't have the right to intimidate Jewish students or foment anti-Semitism or destroy property. Those are laws.
Absolutely. Or set up encampments in the middle of the university, which are against the school's policies, and not clear out when the school is telling you to clear out. That's just not how it works. But over time, these universities, they have given the mouse a cookie. I remember this when I was there. There was a speaker on campus, and students came in it was at the Smith Campus Center, and students came in and disrupted the speech that was happening because they were protesting against climate change. They were demanding that Harvard divest from fossil fuels. And Harvard, to my knowledge, did not do anything. They didn't suspend those students or exact consequences. And so what is the message that they're sending to the students? You're allowed to do this. There's another example. At the engineering school, there was a class on policing. I forget the exact name of the course. It was like something counter continuum policing. Honestly, I didn't really get what the whole thing was about, but it was a course on policing. And of course, some students rose up because policing is so bigoted, right? God forbid there are police. And they rose up and they demanded that the Harvard Engineering School remove that course, that horrible course. And what did the engineering school do? They removed the course. And they issued the statement, which I've read on the show, where they're like, we recognize the implications of, a course like this. And so what I say to these universities is, you have legitimized this behavior. You have given the mouse a cookie. You have demonstrated that when students make demands, you will not hold firm in your authority and say, wait a minute, we're the adults. We're the ones in charge. You'll give in to them. And so no wonder we're now at a place where at graduation, a student is coming up and going, do you hear us? This is what we want. Give it to us now. They don't have to give it to you. All right, let's just watch the final clip and then let's all get a glass of wine because, oh my gosh, people are writing. This is ridiculous. I know. Yeah, a glass of wine after wouldn't be so bad after seeing some of this stuff. Let's just watch the final one of what's her name? Sruthi Kumar.
We are in a moment of intense division and disagreement in our community over the events in Gaza. I see pain, anxiety, and unrest across campus.
Okay, true.
But it's now, in a moment like this, that the power of not knowing becomes critical.
Okay.
Maybe we don't know what it's like to be ethnically targeted.
Okay.
Maybe we don't know what it's like to come face to face with violence and death. But we don't have to know. Solidarity is not dependent on what we know, because not knowing is an ethical stance.
Okay, I'm with her, but I'm also confused. Because I totally agree, and this is what I've said, that people should get up and tell the graduates, you don't know a lot. You think you're enlightened, you think you know things, but you don't. So I'm with her on that. But then she's basically saying that she knows that they're being ethnically targeted, and then she's saying, but you stand in solidarity with what you don't know. You shouldn't stand in solidarity with what you don't know. The whole point in standing in solidarity is that you know that it is the right thing to stand in solidarity. You get the point. It's just brainwashed, confused. So the final thing I'll talk about is I actually gave, when I was at Harvard, a senior speech, which is different from a graduation speech. I gave a senior speech 2 years ago in May of 2022. Let me just explain the background of this. So there are graduation speeches on commencement day where certain students, as you just saw, are picked to talk. But in the weeks leading up to graduation, there are these things called senior speeches. And you, as a senior undergraduate, one senior is chosen from each upperclassman house, and there are 12 upperclassman houses at Harvard, and so one is chosen from each house to sometime in May go to Memorial Chapel, which is right at the center of campus, and give a 5-minute speech on any subject. And so I was chosen for my upperclassman house to give a 5-minute speech on any subject that I wanted. And I gave a speech on the rampant anti-Americanism on campus. And I want to pause because I always want to be fair and, you know, sort of the making sure that I'm applying the same standards to myself that I apply to others. And so one of the things that I just lamented, as you heard, is that these graduations have gotten very, very political. And I gave, as a senior speech, not as a graduation speech, a somewhat political speech condemning anti-Americanism. But I want to explain the difference here. What I was calling out in that speech, I was not talking about a foreign country calling for a ceasefire, for instance, of something that I am totally unaware of. I was talking about something that is very clear and understandable. I think it's ridiculous to, as I say, talk about like a military strategy in a far off country as if like you know exactly what should be done in that situation. I was not doing anything comparable to that in that speech. What I was talking about was anti-Americanism on campus and how there are these terrible things, woke things going on that we do not stand up to. And so, again, I just want to make sure I'm being fair and I'm applying to the same standards for myself. Yes, the speech I gave was political, but it was not at graduation. And if I were to speak at graduation, I don't know that I would have given that speech. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I want to say about the senior speech that I gave, not the graduation speech, is a lot of the things that we're seeing now, to me, were very obvious when I was there. As you'll hear, the anti-Americanism, the cowardice on campus of not standing up to woke ideas. And now it's really sad that we've gotten to a place at these universities where this is so mainstream, where, you know, these graduations are getting disrupted and there are these encampments. Like, it's so sad that it is metastasized into this rancid wokeness that we have now. But I just want to highlight that the seeds were there. So what do you think? Should we play the whole speech? Or maybe I could link it if people want to see it. What do you think, Sean? Should we play it, or? He's looking at me like,
You could. I don't know what you want to do. We've been going for about an hour now, and
well, let's play it. Why don't we play it? And also, did you speed it up a little, because I was speaking very slowly in the speech.
I think you'll find it
faster,
digestible.
Okay, all right. It's a quick speech. It's like 5 minutes and it's sped up. So, if we lose freedom in America, there is no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth. President Ronald Reagan. Last spring break, I went on a trip with 100 other Harvard undergraduates to Israel. It was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life, and I will always be grateful to Harvard for that. I recall the trip with awe and joy, but a certain moment rattled me. Our group attended a Shabbat dinner at a Tel Aviv synagogue. The rabbi proclaimed, "Welcome to Israel. You are all here from America, the best country in the world." He paused, but not a single person clapped. True. The Israelis stared in disbelief. Americans are the freest, most privileged people on earth. Yet many of us are ashamed to show any, even the tiniest trace of national pride. Why? Because we Americans of recent generations have been swaddled in prosperity and security, and in consequence have become ungrateful for the blessings we enjoy. It requires vigorous athletic imagination for most of us to consider the basic brutal realities that much of the world experiences daily. Even worse, we have consumed a cultural diet that reduces America to its ugliest moments and dismisses its noble ideals and accomplishments as jingoism. This nation saved the world from global catastrophe 3 times in the 20th century. This nation has grown to treat racial, ethnic, and religious minorities with equality and respect compared to other places and times on earth. This is the nation where people are not constrained by their gender, religion, or class, but can work to achieve a better life. In this nation, we can criticize our government, secure in the knowledge that we will rise the next morning and our country will still respect our rights. We view these things to be our birthright, our permanent and guaranteed condition, but they are not. They exist only because past generations have sacrificed to secure and maintain them. And to our discredit, we have used these blessings not to strengthen our country, but to tear it down.
Just as we just saw.
We members of this university and we Americans have shirked our responsibility as the most privileged cohort on earth. We have remained cringingly silent in the face of corrosive ideas, woke culture, that has corrupted our institutions and severed the bonds that hold our country together. The New York Times won a Pulitzer Prize for reporting that the sole purpose of the American Revolution was to preserve slavery, and we remain silent. The Oregon Department of Education asserts that showing your work and finding the right answer in math is white supremacist, and we remain silent. The American Medical Association has stated that the US should remove gender from birth certificates, and we remain silent. Howard Zinn, the author of the most widely read history text in American public schools, said that America has done, quote, more bad than good, and we remain silent. A huge percentage of the donations to the National Black Lives Matter organization have been spent on compensation and benefits, including several extravagant real estate purchases and questionable consulting contracts, and we remain silent. On this campus, we often hear how oppressive America is. Just outside of this church, there was a sign for Israeli Apartheid Week of an upside-down, faded American flag with painted bullet holes in it. And we remain silent. We must not lie to ourselves or to one another by denying that a large reason that we remain silent is that we see personal and professional advantages in doing so. We are ashamed to be American. The shame should be on us. The people who excoriate religion live in a society where their freedoms are based on teachings in the Bible. Many who say that the nuclear family is antiquated grew up in 2-parent households. Those who condemn the police as oppressive still summon them when they are in danger. And too many use their right to free speech to advocate suspending it for all who disagree with them. What a litany of dishonesty. We are using our privilege to undermine the very system that has given us that privilege. America, despite its failings, is the last great stand on earth. We must speak up against this now, or our civilization will face a somber reckoning. As President Reagan said, if not us, who? If not now, when? Thank you.
What is democracy?
No.
Can't stop.
Why are we seeing Biden after me?
No. Let it go. Let it go.
Oh, okay. All right.
I have a point here. Play
All right.
that Biden
All right,
clip.
play it.
He's at Morehouse
All right.
last week.
All right.
Wars that break out and break our hearts. In a democracy, we debate and dissent about America's role in the world. I want to say this very clearly. I support peaceful, nonviolent protest. Your voices should be heard, and I promise you I hear them.
I think part of the problem in this country is from decades of the left catering to the vote. They pander to the young college students and they have fomented this over decades.
Oh, absolutely.
What we see now, Biden just wants your vote. Your voice is being heard. But what he should be doing is standing up and being an adult, rather than and putting America first and doing what's right by the American citizen and not pandering for votes. And you see that across the left, and you also see it on the right. But that's my whole point. Like, this is why we see this on college campuses. The greatest privilege in the world is American privilege, not
That's
white
what I was
privilege.
saying.
American privilege. And these students, she talked about not being targeted like what, like the Jews are targeted? You are so ignorant to the ways of the world. You and I have both been to Israel, right? At least we've done that. You can't, at that age, understand the intricacies of the world and the history that has come before you. And so it's all emotion and passion, and it just rings so dead. You hear it all the time, and it's they say these things to get applause for validation of their thought, and it's just a vicious cycle for votes, and it's bringing us down. Yes, America is not perfect, but it is the last best hope, period.
Thank you for your kind comments, those of you in the chat about the speech. And yes, exactly, Sean. And that's what I was trying to say in my speech. And, again, and I'm literally doing this in real time, live on the air. I always try to look at myself and go, okay, am I applying the same standards to myself that I apply to others? And yes, my speech was political, but here's the difference. Well, there are many differences. First of all, in that speech, I'm defending this system that we have. I literally said that. I said, I lamented the fact that we at this university are using our privilege to undermine the very system that has given us that privilege, i.e. the American system. I'm trying to stand up there and defend what we have and come from a place of saying that we are so privileged as Americans and we can't let these corrosive lies be spread. That is a very stark difference from what we just saw. America criminalizes poor people. America is a place where trans and queer people are forced to hide who they are. That individual was proving my point, which is undermining the very system which has given us that privilege. And so I do recognize that maybe my, assertion that things have gotten too political, I'm practicing a little bit myself. But if this makes sense, like I'm lamenting how political it's gotten. I'm lamenting the lies. I'm lamenting the deceit that's wrapped up in the politicization of this country. I talked about Black Lives Matter. I talked about Howard Zinn. I talked about the Oregon Department of Education. I'm lamenting that, I want to get back to a place where all of us understand and appreciate our country and don't lie about it constantly. And as I say, if I were up there at graduation, this was a senior speech, if I were up there at graduation, I don't think I would make it political. I would talk about life, and I would hope a graduation speaker would talk about life. That's part of why we want these established people to come and speak to us, not to tell us about what they did about guns and abortion, but to tell us how we can be happy, healthy, full people. Because not all of us will go on to be the leader of a country, but all of us are going to go on to live in life, which is a hard thing. And that's what we really need advice about, not politics. So anyway, just trying to be fair here. But gosh, I think what we've exposed today is important, that this is now what's happening at these universities. These are who these universities are appointing to preach to the rest of us, about the way that they see the world. And this is how they see the world. That's kind of it. That's how they see the world. They appear to really not like America. They appear to be very entitled, very demanding. And that's kind of a somber thing, but nevertheless an important thing for us to recognize. Any final thoughts, Shanzi?
No, I mean, you watched this whole thing, right? You didn't just cherry pick two examples.
No.
You watched the whole thing. Did anyone talk about life like you were suggesting?
Well, I watched okay, a lot of the live stream, it's people like marching into the procession. So a lot of it isn't speeches. I watched the entirities of these student speeches. I did not watch the entirety of the main speaker, like the adult speaker. I don't even know who it is. So I didn't watch that. I watched maybe like a minute of it, and it did seem very political. So maybe they did talk, she went on to talk about life. But from what I heard from the main speaker, the little bit was very, like, she was talking about being a journalist and how journalists are persecuted today. And she was called a communist and all this stuff. So even the little I saw of her speech seemed political. But I didn't get a lot of sense of any life talk.
So it is graduation season, and we're going to be seeing all kinds of speeches. I would imagine 80 to 90% of the speeches are going to be like we observed here from Harvard. In contradiction to that, we saw the commencement speech at Benedictine College by Harrison Buchter, which has caught all kinds of flack, and to ask him whether KGP was asked at the White House presser whether the Chiefs would be allowed to visit the White House because they won the Super Bowl. Women are protesting what he said about his wife being happy to be a mother. You won't see that kind of outrage about what we just witnessed from Harvard speeches.
Very true. Very, very true. Just want to read a comment from the chat. Understand and appreciate our country. Share the truth about what's good. Condemn those who lie or smear the truth. I really like that comment because that's fundamentally what I try to do, and all of us should try to do. But maybe right and left at graduations, we keep it light, we keep it about life, and we get rid of the political. I would say that of even that speech that you referenced, which is a right-wing speech. I just think graduation, just have fun. My God, pop some champagne and have some fun. Don't talk about Gaza or anything else. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I hope that you enjoyed it. We're not usually on Thursdays, as I said, but I hope that you'll tune in Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. I really enjoy the discussion element of this show where, talking about things in real time, getting audience perspectives, and just leaving this as a place of exploration and free speech and dialogue. So thank you for being here. And please do check out Dennis and Julie every Sunday at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. This Sunday is a particularly fun episode. Take care, everybody. I'll see you soon.